Hey guys, sit down. شروع کر دیں. It's 8:40 already. 8:40. 8:40 ہو گئے. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. عن جابر بن عبد اللہ الانصاری انہ قال عن فاطمة الزہرا علیہ السلام بنت رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ قال سمعت فاطمة انها قالت دخل علی ابی رسول اللہ فی بعض الایام فقال السلام علیک یا فاطمہ فقلت علیک السلام قال انی اجد فی بدنی ضعف فقلت له اعوذک باللہ یا ابتہ من الضعف فقال یا فاطمة ائتینی بالکساء الیمانی فغطینی به فاتیتہ بالکساء الیمانی فغطيته به وسرت انظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أمه فقلت وعليك السلام يا خرتين وسمرة فؤادي فقال يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوز قد أذنت لك، فدخل معه تحت الكساء. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل، وقال السلام عليك يا أمه، وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا خرتين وسمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أمه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه والسلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافي أمتي قد أذنت لك، فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عندك ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم ها هو ما ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال له عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسي وخليفتي وصاحب لواء قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبته يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بزأتي قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أخذ برسول الله بطرف الكساء وأوميا بيديه اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن آذاهم ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورزوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا رب ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبالها وبنوها. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال جبرائيل يا رب أتأذن لي أن أحبط إلى الأرض ليكون معهم سادسة؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فحبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرؤك السلام ويقصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مزية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تعذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيه واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيه ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي إذن والله فزنا وفاز شيتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانية يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيه واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيه ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيتنا ومحبينا وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله حمه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وخذ الله حاجته. فقال علي إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيتنا فعزوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Please recite Surah Fatiha for our Mahumeen and yours. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. صلوات.
اور محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. مختصر رکھوں صرف 2 شعر. پایا غازی حسین نے تذبیوں میں وفا وفا کہہ کے چہرہ غازی کا چومتی ہیں عالیہ بھی خدا خدا کہہ کے. پایا غازی حسین نے تذبیوں میں وفا وفا کہہ کے. تیرے لب پہ میری گواہی ہے کیا طبیعت میں تو الہی ہے. بن کے زہرا بلاؤں گی تمہیں غازی ردا ردا کہہ کے. پایا غازی حسین نے
تسبیحوں میں وفا وفا کہہ کے، سب کے مشکل سے جو بچاتا ہے، خود خدا کے جو کام آتا ہے، لوری دیتا ہے وہ علی، تمہیں مشکل کشا کشا کہہ کے پایا غازی۔
بر محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم۔
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔ ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد۔ چار مصرے۔
ملی ہے کربلا کی جبیں پر اٹھا کے ملی ہے کربلا کی جبیں پر اٹھا کے پوچھے گا مجھ سے قبر میں اب کوئی آ کے پوچھے گا مجھ سے قبر میں اب کوئی آ کے سو جاؤں گا سکون سے پھولوں کی سیج پر سو جاؤں گا سکون سے پھولوں کی سیج پر فرش لحد پہ کرب و بلا کی بچھا کے ملی ہے کربلا کی۔
ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات،
صلی اللہ محمد وآل محمد۔
قافلے کی واپسی کے حوال کے
مدت کے بعد آئے مدینے میں سوگوار مدت کے
یاد آئے مدینے میں سوگوار کچھ یاد آ گیا تو ہوئے اور بے قرار اکبر ہیں ساتھ اور عباس نامدار عابد بہرنا پا ہیں تو زینب ہے دل فگار قبر نبی پہ زینب مزتر کے ہیں یہ بے نانا دہائی ہم سے جدا ہو گئے حسین مدت کے بعد آوے ایک اور بلند ترین صلوات سلام کے چند شعر جناب محب فاضی کے کلام میں سے پشیماں تھا شاہ والا کے در پر آ گیا پشیماں تھا شاہ والا کے در پر آ گیا ایک لمحہ تھا جو صدیوں کے برابر آ گیا ایک لمحہ تھا جو صدیوں کے برابر آ گیا پشیماں تھا شاہ والا کے در پر آ گیا ایک حبیب ابن مظاہر کربلا کیا گئے ایک حبیب ابن مظاہر کربلا کیا گئے شہ کو یہ محسوس ہوتا ہے کہ لشکر آ گیا شہ کو یہ محسوس ہوتا ہے کہ لشکر آ گیا پشیماں تھا شاہ والا کے در پر آ گیا اور یہ حقیقت ہے پیمبر کی حفاظت کے لیے یہ حقیقت ہے پیمبر کی حفاظت کے لیے ایک ابو طالب کا گھر تیغوں کی زد پر آ گیا ایک ابو طالب کا گھر تیغوں کی زد پر آ گیا پشیماں تھا اے بلند ترین صلوات در پر آ گیا اور اب تو دل کی آنکھ سے ہم روز جاتے ہیں نہ جا اب تو دل کی آنکھ سے ہم روز جاتے ہیں نہ ایک ذرا سی آنکھ جھپ کی علم کا در آ گیا ایک ذرا سی آنکھ جھپ کی علم کا در آ گیا ہوئے پشے ماتھا شاہ والا کے آگر وصف ہے در یوں سمٹ کر آ گئے عباس میں وصف ہے در یوں سمٹ کر آ گئے عباس جیسے کل قرآن نکتے میں سمٹ کر آ گئے جیسے کل قرآن نکتے میں سمٹ کر آ گیا ماتھا شاہ والا کے در پر آ گیا اور جنگ خندق میں زمین کو کاٹ دے تھے ذوالفقار جنگ خندق میں زمین کو کاٹ دیتے ذوالفقار اور خیر گزری درمیان جبریل کا پر آ گئے خیر گزری درمیان جبریل کا پر آ گیا ہوئے پشے ماتھا شاہ والا کے در پر شیر ملازم اور مصطفیٰ اور شاہدی دونوں کا قاتل ایک ہے مصطفیٰ اور شاہدی دونوں کا قاتل ایک ہے فرق بس اتنا ہے وہ چہرہ بدل کر آ گئے بس اتنا ہے وہ چہرہ بدل کر آ گیا پشے شاہ والا کے در پر آ گئے اور دل میں کیا کیا حاجتیں ہیں کیا لکھوں یہ سوچ کر دل میں کیا کیا حاجتیں ہیں کیا لکھوں یہ سوچ ارے میں عریضے میں دل مضطر کو رکھ کر آ گیا میں عریضے میں دل مضطر کو رکھ کر آ گیا ہوئے پشے ماتھا شاہ والا مقترزو آ گیا اور اے محب وہ جو نبی سے ایک ناوی پا سکا اے محب وہ جو نبی سے ایک تک نہ پا سکا سات بیٹے وہ شاہ والا سے لے کر آ گیا سات بیٹے وہ شاہ والا سے لے کر آ گیا ہوئے پشے ماتھا شاہ والا کے در پر آ گیا ایک لمحہ تھا جو صدیوں کے برابر آ گیا ہوئے پشے ماتھا شاہ
محمد الوال مرسی کی چنچیر سورہ فاتحہ
اور محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
جب قید سے اسیر رہا ہو گئے تمام، جب قید سے اسیر رہا ہو گئے تمام، قبر سکینہ پر گئے روتے ہوئے، ماتم کنا تھے ساتھ میں سب اہل حرام، تم ماتم کنا تھے ساتھ میں اہل حرام تم، اور آہستہ آ رہی تھیں رباب خجستہ کام، آہستہ آ رہی رباب خجستہ، چھوٹی سی قبر سامنے نظروں کے پہ گئی، ایک آہ سرد کھینچ کے مرقد پہ گر گئی، ایک آہ سرد کھینچ کے مرقد پہ گر گئی، ایک آہ سرد کھینچ کے مرقد پہ گر گئی، بولی اٹھو کہ قافلہ تیار ہو چکا، جاتا ہے وطن کو تمہارا یہ قافلہ، بیٹا تمہیں رہائی کا ارمان تھا بڑا، جب تم نہیں تو گھر سے مجھے واسطہ ہے کیا، جب تم نہیں تو گھر سے مجھے واسطہ ہے کیا، تیرے بغیر گھر کو میں ہرگز نہ جاؤں گی، بن کر فقیر قبر پہ آنسو بہاؤں گی، بن کر فقیر قبر پہ آنسو بہاؤں گے، بن کر فقیر قبر پہ آنسو بہاؤں گے، روتے ہوئے لحد سے حرم اٹھ کھڑے ہوئے، بولی رباب جاتی ہوں حکم امام سے، رو کر کہا یہ زینب عالی مقام نے، قربان جاؤں شکوہ نہ کی جو حسین سے، قربان جاؤں شکوہ نہ کی جو حسین سے، قربان جاؤں شکوہ نہ کی جو حسین سے، اہل شام واسطہ رب کریم کا، پیچھے خیال رکھنا ہمارے یتیم کا، پیچھے خیال رکھنا ہمارے یتیم کا، القصہ پہنچے کربو بلا میں یہ نوح گئے، زینب تڑپ کے گر گئی بھائی کی قبر پر، اس طرح بین کرتی تھی وہ سوختہ، بھابھی کی گود اجڑ گئی بھیا کرو نظر، بھابھی کی گود اجڑ گئی بھیا کرو نظر، تم کو خبر ہے ہم پہ جو آفت گزر گئی، قید ستم میں بالی سکینہ بھی مر گئی، قید
ستم میں بالی سکینہ بھی مر گئی، قید ستم میں بالی سکینہ بھی مر گئی۔ بھیا تمہارے بعد وہ آفت پڑی، اصغر کا سر بھی کاٹ لیا، قبر کھود گئے۔ خنجر گلے پہ جب وہ چلاتا تھا بدگو، ہم دیکھتے تھے اور پھٹا جاتا تھا، ہم دیکھتے تھے اور پھٹا جاتا تھا جگر، ہم دیکھتے تھے اور پھٹا جاتا تھا جگر۔ یہ دیکھ کر رباب کی حالت تباہ، آنکھوں سے اشک بہتے تھے اور لب پہ آنکھوں سے اشک بہتے تھے اور لب پہ آہتے، آنکھوں سے اشک بہتے تھے اور لب، آخری شعر، سر لے کے جب شقی وہ وہاں سے چلا گیا، دوڑی رباب گود میں لاشا اٹھا لیا اور چومتی تھی حلقے بریدہ کو باہر، وہ بین تھے کہ سب کا کلیجہ ہلا دیا، وہ بین تھے کہ سب کا کلیجہ ہلا دیا، نالے ہی کرتے کرتے وہ خاموش ہو گئی، لاشا لیے وہ گود میں بے ہوش ہو گئی، لاشا لیے وہ گود میں بے ہوش ہو گئی، لاشا لیے وہ گود میں بے ہوش ہو گئی، جب قید سے اسیر
ایک صلوات پڑھ لیجئے۔ Today is just quick reminder for Sunday program. There's a Jalous in Queens Flushing from Franklin Avenue after Zorain. Please attend that program. Now I invite Khatib Ali Muhammad, Janab Bilal Hussain Sahab, to come and give a speech to the audience. Thank you.
Before we begin, there's a request for dua shafa'ah for Salma Bai Ladak, the principal of the Mehfil-e-Madrasa, as well as for Amir Khalfan of New York, both who are sick and in need of du'as. We ask Allah by the right of this night that inshallah may Allah give them shafa'ah 5 times with your loudest voices and may you jib. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. With the request of one Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of tonight's sponsors, Mr. and Mrs. Zishan Naqvi and family, Mrs. Rukhsana Naqvi, and all of their marhumin and all of those who are present for Arwah al-Mu'minina wal-Mu'minat, Thawab al-Fatiha.
We're expecting more people, so please come forward. Come forward, please. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واسألهم عن القرية التي كانت حاضرة البحر إذ يعدون في السبت إذ تأتيهم حيتانهم يوم سبتهم شرعا ويوم لا يسبتون لا تأتيهم كذلك نبلوهم بما كانوا يفسقون. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'jeel faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. Our discussions over the last few nights have been broken into two parts. The first of these, we've been discussing the etiquette and the rules and the ahkam of burial. Upon completion of the basic ahkam of burial and some of the conversations that we've had describing some of the philosophies and understanding, one of the important things that we have is the visiting of the graves. The visiting of the graves is one of the recommended actions to perform, and there's two sets of narrations that explain why. The first of these is a narration that comes from our holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Alaykum bihadim al-ladhat wa ma huwa dhalik ziyaratu ahl al-qubur. Our Prophet said, I enjoin upon you and I invite you and I tell you to be careful and to participate. Alaykum, it's upon you to take part in the destroyer of desires. People ask, what are the destroyer of desires? And our Prophet explained, visiting the people of the graves. The instruction of visiting the graves from this aspect talks about the idea that when we get caught up in this world, when the only things that we can think about are this dunya and enjoying this world and enjoying its benefits and pleasures, that to focus your life on your priorities and know what's important and accomplish important things in your life and not waste your time on trivial matters. Go visit the graves. Go visit the graves and remember that soon you will be there too. Amongst the recommended actions when we see a janazah, one of the things that's recommended to say is, Antum min al-mutaqaddimin wa nahnu min al-mutaakhirin. You have gone before us, but we are shortly to follow after you. We're coming too. From this aspect, going to the grave is a reminder that don't get caught up. Don't worry about these little trivial matters. Don't worry about these little arguments and fights. Don't chase after the dunya so much that you never accomplish anything with your life. The other aspect of this conversation and the other benefit of why we should go to the graves comes from our sixth Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Where he mentions, when you can't visit us, then visit our Shia and the most pious amongst our followers. and it will be as if you have come to our graves. We have a desire. All of our friends, how many of our community members and friends are in the land of Karbala today? How many of them have the opportunity to go and visit the Ahlul Bayt, and we wonder and we wish that, I wish that I could go. Well, when we don't have the ability to go, the Ahlul Bayt taught us, wherever you are in the world, go visit the graves of the pious believers, and it will be as if you visited us. But the reward would be as if you came to us. That's why visiting the graves is amongst the important things, and especially for family members. Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, Salaam Marsiya. In her final wasiyah to Imam Ali said, don't leave me alone. The grave is a house of loneliness. Oh Ali, come and visit me. Come and sit with me. I know that sometimes we think, and this is more for our younger audiences, that when someone dies, they've left us, they're gone. No, they're still present. They're still aware. And it's good that we go and we sit with them and we talk to them and we spend time by them. It's also good to remember them and recite Fatiha for them wherever we are in the world. Maybe our relatives and our loved ones are far away, buried off in different countries, as we are immigrants here. Doesn't mean we should forget them. When someone asked their sixth Imam about this, that, well, if I'm far away from my relatives and I can't visit them, is there any point in me even saying Fatiha for them? And the Imam explains, yes. Because the awareness that the soul possesses is different than the awareness that the body possesses. You see, your body can only hear things within a certain range, and we build things like microphones to extend that range so that people further away can hear us. But a soul's awareness is different. Imam Sadiq explained, he said, the soul looks at the earth as if you look at a ball in your hand, that the entire earth is something that the soul can be aware of simultaneously. In which sense, no matter where our relatives are buried, we should make it a practice to remember them with Fatiha. And if we have the ability to visit their graves and to sit by their graves, it's a good action for us, and it's a kindness done to them. And remember something. We're going inside here, we're okay? Tonight we have time, right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The same way it's good for us to visit the graves, the people of the graves visit you. This is a very interesting point. We know that the arwah, the spirits of those who have died, come to visit us. In Surah Qadr, Allah makes this point. تَنَزُّلُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالرُّوحُ فِيهَا. On the night of Qadr, Allah sends the angels and the spirits, the ruh of the deceased. The ruh of the deceased can come and can visit its family. Not just the good people, even the bad people. Do you know why? Because when that soul visits its family, it's either a reward or a punishment. The Ahlul Bayt explained that on Thursday nights, spend these nights in piety because Allah sends the angels to ask and see, is there anyone who wants something from Allah? And He also sends the spirits of people to go visit their relatives and family members. Now those relatives whose family members are doing good things, Allah lets them see these good things, and it's a reward for them. But those souls that Allah wants to punish, He also lets them see their relatives. He also lets them visit their families. But they see their families busy in committing sins, not following the rules of Allah. And this is a source of punishment for them. Do you know why? Because now that the curtain's lifted off of their eyes, they know what was important in life and what was a waste of time. And when they come back and they see you, they wish they could tell you, what are the important things? What should you be doing with your life? What's the valuable things you need to dedicate your time to? But when they see you, instead of doing those important things, going to the movies, watching TV, not remembering Allah, not praying, not doing anything special to acknowledge this special time that Allah has given on this earth, it's a source of pain for them. The same way those souls that come to visit us, and they see us busy in good things, they see us remembering Allah, they see us reciting Dua al-Kumail, they see us praying, they see us paying attention to our parents, doing good deeds. It's a reward for them. I say, Alhamdulillah, I may have left this world, I may have shortcomings, but at least my children, my lineage, my family is busy in good things. They know what Allah wants from them. Alhamdulillah, Allah has protected my children, and the advice that I would give them today, they're already enacting it in their lives. So the deceased visit us, and we should visit the deceased. Now, there are times in which it is recommended to visit the deceased. There are particular times. Now, that doesn't mean that if I don't hit one of these time windows, I shouldn't go. Like, oh, the time passed, never mind, we'll go some other day. No, no, no. But if I could build it into my schedule, these are the best times to be there. This is when it's recommended. All day on the day of Monday, from Fajr till Maghrib, it's mustahab. It's recommended to visit the people of the grave. On Thursdays, also, you can go anytime during the day, but the best time to visit them is between Asr and Maghrib. So about 3 o'clock in the afternoon until Maghrib time. Fajr, it's recommended to visit them in the morning from after the time of prayer, Fajr, until the time of sunrise. This is the time, the best time to visit. Or in the evenings by the time of Maghrib and close to the time of Maghrib. The middle of Friday is a time in which it's recommended for us to spend in worship of Allah. So therefore, the morning and the evening are recommended. Saturday mornings, it's actually very recommended to visit the people of the graves. It's actually noted to say that Bibi Fatima to Zahra, salamullahi alayha, would visit the grave of her uncle, Hazrat Hamza. Hazrat Hamza, the uncle of the Holy Prophet, is also known as Sayyid al-Shuhada, master of the martyrs. In Islam, before Imam Hussain, this title was given to Hazrat Hamza, who was killed in the Battle of Uhud. And Bibi Fatima made it a practice that every Saturday in the morning she would go to his grave and sit there and visit with him. Now, what's interesting is that, you guys are okay? Again, I can... Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Today, one of the things that's recommended for you to possess and as a protection for you is a tasbih that's made of khaki shifa. Right? The grave of Imam Hussain, we take and make a tasbih out of it. This khaki shifa is both a hirz, is a protection for you. It protects you from many difficulties and problems, as well as simply, even if I don't recite anything, turning this tasbih in my hand is mustahab. It's a recommended action. I get reward for it. Even if I said nothing, I get reward for it. And then if I'm turning it and I'm saying something, double your bounties, double your rewards, you're good to go. The practice of making a tasbih from the clave of the grave of Imam Hussain actually goes back to Bibi Fatima. She was the first one to take the dust and the clay of the grave of her uncle Hazrat Hamza and make a tasbih. And she used that tasbih to do the dhikr of Allah. So this practice of having a tasbih and doing dhikr from the dust and the clay that's made of a grave, and the grave of Imam Hussain no less, goes back to how the mother of Imam Hussain made a tasbih from the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada of her time, Hazrat Hamza. Now when we go to the graves, whether it's in the allotted times we've discussed or any time that we have, any time that it's possible. In America, it's easier to go on Sundays. Still good. What do you do when you go to the grave? First and foremost, when we go to the graves and the graves of our loved ones, it's not recommended to stand, rather to sit. Many times you'll see we go and it's an uncomfortable place to be. Bring a chair with you. Sit on the ground. Bring something to sit on. It's recommended that when I go to this person in the grave, I sit by them. I sit by them and I face the direction of Qibla. So remember, we talked about how we bury someone, right shoulder, we can figure out how they are, we sit on the side, and we sit by the grave. Then there are some things that are recommended to recite. Sometimes we go to the grave and we don't know what to do. The Ahlul Bayt have taught us what to do. The first of these things that's recommended is to recite Surah Qadr 7 times when we sit by the grave. The second thing, Surah Fatiha 3 times. Surah Nas and Falaq, which are known as Ma'udhatain, 3 times each. Ayat al-Kursi 3 times. And then finally, Surah Yasin 1 time. Now, it doesn't mean that I have to do all of these every time I go. I can select 1 or 2 of these items if I have a limited amount of time and perform 1 or 2 of these items as I sit by the grave. And every time change and do something different and send the thawab to the marhum that I'm going to sit with. It's from these recommended actions that we have also that you can sit and talk to the person. But when we sit and we talk to the person, be careful of what you're talking about. Remember how we're mentioning at the same point in time that being lost in this world and being concerned with worldly affairs is something that pains the deceased. It pains them because they're finding you lost in, should I be buying, for example, a BMW, or should I go and buy a Tesla? I wish you were here to help me. Now, I don't know if the savings that I'll have on gas. If you're sitting there talking to the marhum would be crying about this, that I want you to talk to me about salat. I want you to talk to me about family. I want you to talk to me about Allah. I want you to talk to me about good things, about raising your children. And here we are talking about, well, you know, my current job is paying me, but the new job might ask for more time and I can't have flex. Baba, these are not affairs that we want to talk about with the marhum. It may be true that it's lightening of our heart to talk about our worldly affairs in these situations, but pay attention to what's good for you and what's good for them. And it's better for them and for us that when we sit by them by the grave and we talk to them about those affairs that pertain to our akhirah, that pertain to our faith, that pertain to us wanting to be better people, doing good things, remembering them, remembering Allah, so that our sitting with them is not a punishment to them, but rather is a source of reward and comfort for them. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the second half of our discussion, we've been talking about stories of nations and people that Allah has described in the Quran. We talked about Ahl Tharthar, the people of the lake of Hazar. We talked about Ahl Raqim, Ashab al-Raqim. We talked about Ashab al-Kahf. Tonight's conversation is about a group of people who are known as Ashab al-Sabt, the people of Saturday. Now, this is not to frighten you about how to spend tomorrow as Saturday. This is to talk to you about the importance of why this nation was known as the people of Saturday. Everybody's ready? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Amongst the Bani Israel, they settled into many different lands and many different locations. One group of the Bani Israel found a place by the sea where they settled and they made a village. And this village they built up and they built a wall around it, made it protected, made it a large group and a large community established there. And Allah sent to them a prophet. When this prophet came to them, according to some narrations, he says that Allah commands to you to give some time from your week to him. He said, okay, Prophet of Allah, what do you want? And this prophet told them, he says, Allah commands to you that on the day of Friday, you will make a portion of the day and dedicate it to Allah. And the people of this town, who were fishers, because they lived by the sea, and they made their money fishing. And they would go out into the sea, catch fish, and that's what they ate, that's what they sold, that's what they lived upon. They said, oh, Prophet of Allah, give us some time to think about this. We want to have the opportunity to discuss this. They began the process of negotiating. Prophet said, this is what Allah has commanded you. They said, we'll come back to you, Prophet of Allah. They went back and they had a conversation amongst themselves and they said, this middle of Friday nonsense is difficult. Now remember something. The idea of worshiping Allah on Friday, that Friday is a special day, was not just for the Muslimin. The day of Friday was something Allah dedicated from the beginning of time, that this would be a special time for us. That's why it's known as a day of Eid. It's known as a day of Allah answering du'as. It's known as a day of worship. But every nation went about and they began some corruption in this. And we saw that the Bani Israel, the followers of the religion of Nabi Musa, they took Saturday instead. They took the Sabbath. We saw the followers of Nabi Isa, the followers of the Bible, they took Sunday. And in response to that, we stayed on the day of Friday. Allah tells us on the day of Friday to go and to worship Allah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawm al-jum'ah fas'u ila dhikrillahi wa dharul bay'. Allah gave us the same instruction that all those of you who have faith, when you hear the call to prayers on Friday, hurry to Allah. Hurry to the remembrance of Allah. فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةُ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. And Allah said, once prayers is done, then go out into the world and enjoy the bounties and take advantage of whatever Allah has offered you. The point of this to say is that what Allah told us to do was nothing new. Allah told us, come on Fridays, pray, and then leave. The same way He told this nation through a prophet, come on Fridays, pray, and then leave. But this nation of the Bani Israel decided to negotiate, and they said, it doesn't work for us. You see, when the ship leaves out into the sea, to bring it back and then go out again, we wouldn't even get out before we have to come back for these prayers. So you know what? It doesn't work for us that Friday, the middle of the day, we have to give to Allah. So they came back to this prophet and they negotiated. And I said, Prophet of Allah, Friday doesn't work for us. It's a business day. We have work to do, money to be made, fish to be caught, ships to sail. Why don't you tell Allah that instead give us Saturday? We'll take Saturday. Saturday is easier. It'll be nicer. Have a break. Prophet of Allah said, are you sure? Now remember, we have time, right? Everybody's awake? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This wasn't the first time that the Bani Israel tried or negotiated with Allah. You know when you hear about the parting of the Red Sea, right? When the Red Sea parted and Musa was taking the Bani Israel and an army set on genocide and killing them was chasing behind them. You would imagine that the people would see the sea part and they say, oh, thank God, and run. They didn't. The sea parted. They said, but the ground is kind of soft. I don't know if we'll make it. Tell Allah to make the ground hard. So Allah made the ground hard. Then they looked and they said, oh Musa, we're 12 tribes. Which one of us will go in front and which one of us will be behind? Whoever is behind, it'll be disrespectful for them. Tell Allah to make us 12 pathways here so that all 12 of our tribes can move together and no tribe would be behind another. Allah made 12 pathways in the sea. Then they complained again. They said, but now we don't know which one of us will be faster and which one of us will be slower. Maybe one will get out first and one will take longer. Musa, tell Allah to create windows in these pathways so that we can all move together in our unique paths. Allah did it. Allah gave them all of these miracles to keep them together. And sure enough, they got 12 pathways with windows between that they could see one another. And the 12 tribes had firm ground to comfortably walk across. And they walked across the Red Sea. They had negotiated before with Allah, so they had an idea. They were like, it worked before, let's try again. So they came back to this prophet and they said, hey, we want Saturdays. We'll give Allah any part of Saturday he wants. Then the prophet of Allah asked Allah that, oh Allah, this nation is asking for this. So Allah replied to them and he said, okay, fine. But on Saturday, I want the whole day. There's no fishing on Saturdays. There's no making money on Saturdays. There's no doing any work of any kind on Saturday. Today, you see that the Bani Israel, those who are pious, still practice this. That on Saturdays, there's no business. You can't use elevators. You can't use machines. You can't turn on the stove. You can't even tear tissue paper. For those who are pious, they don't even tear tissue paper. So the ruling came that fine, you want to worship me on Saturday? Fine. But you will do nothing on Saturday. People said, that's easy enough. No problem. What's the big deal in that? Sure, we'll do this. The Quran tells us this story, by the way. This story comes to us in the Quran in Surah A'raf, verse number 163, 164. Look at how Allah describes this nation. وَاسْأَلْهُمْ عَنِ الْقَرْيَةِ الَّتِي كَانَتْ حَاضِرَةَ الْبَحْرِ. Ask them, O Prophet of Allah, ask them about the town that was by this sea. إِذْ يَعْدُونَ فِي السَّبْتِ. And when they exceeded the limits of the Sabbath. إِذْ تَأْتِيهِمْ حَيْتَانُهُمْ يَوْمُ السَّبْتِهِمْ. That on the day of Saturday, the fish would come to them. حَيْتَانُهُمْ يَوْمُ السَّبْتِهِمْ شُرَّعًا. With their mouths open, jumping out of the water. وَيَوْمَ لَا يَسْبِتُونَ لَا تَأْتِيهِمْ. And every other day than Saturday, no fish would come to them. كَذَلِكَ نَبْلُوَهُمْ بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْسِدُونَ. And so we tested them. So what did Allah do? Said, you want to bargain with me? No problem. You can bargain with me. So what did Allah do? 6 days a week, Sunday through Friday, they would go out into the ocean and go fishing. As deep as they could, as far as they could. And they'd catch nothing. Not a single fish. But as soon as Saturday would come, the fish would come to the shore and sit there with their mouths open out of the water. Big, beautiful fish. And Allah tested them to see who was going to be honest amongst them. The first of the lessons, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Don't try to bargain with the rules of Allah. There are times that we don't understand the command of Allah. There are times that we may not agree with the command of Allah, but it's important that we acknowledge that this is the command of Allah and that we submit to that command of Allah wholeheartedly. And we don't try to compromise and debate and come up with alternate explanations or try to change the rules of Allah or say that this rule doesn't apply to our time. This was made for another generation. Within Islam, there are rules that you will find don't fit our society. They don't make sense to us. They may have nothing to do with us. But that doesn't mean that they don't belong in Islam. Shall I give you an example? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I give you this example taking my own life into my own hands here. The idea of 4 marriages. We live in a country where it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It doesn't fit the culture. It doesn't fit the society. It doesn't fit the lifestyle. Does that mean Islam is backwards? Does that mean that Islam didn't know better than to create such a rule that would justify a man to have 4 wives? No. Rather, what we say is that Islam is a religion that began 1400 years ago, and it will continue until the day of judgment. And within this time period, many different nations with many different cultures and many different needs will subscribe to the religion of Islam. Just because it doesn't fit my culture, my lifestyle, doesn't mean that the rule doesn't need to exist. There may be nations and times and places in this world where this rule applies. For me to say that this rule is bad, that what was Allah thinking when He made this rule, is something that we would call a very ethnocentric perspective. That if it doesn't agree with my culture and my lifestyle, then it must be foolish and bad. There are many rules within Islam that may not fit our needs of our society. Another one is the idea that urine, ajallakumullah, is najis. And when we look at urine, we say that this is najis. And we say that one shouldn't touch this, one cannot do these actions with it. To us, it seems second nature, that this is harmful. This is contamination. This is filth. How could anyone ever question the fact that this shouldn't be considered najis? Let me tell you something. In the history of humanity, urine has been used as a toothpaste. Medical examiners in ancient Rome used to determine if a person had diabetes by sipping their urine to see if it was sweet. Today, it may seem that these rules make no sense, but within the history of humanity, each of the laws that Allah has prescribed had a purpose and served humanity and was designed that humanity from that day until the day of judgment can live within the bounds of Islam. Which is why when we see the rules of Allah, whether they make sense to us or not, we accept them. Do they apply to us? Not necessarily. Do they have to apply to us? Not necessarily. But some people at some point in time who prescribe to the religion of Islam, Allah established boundaries for all of humanity. That if this is a part of the culture that you live in, then it's important to know what your limits are, what you can do and what you can't do. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now these people of this village, this town of the sea, they had a problem that they needed to solve. Sunday through Thursday, Sunday through Friday, no fish. Saturday, lots of fish. But they're not allowed to catch them. They're not allowed to fish them. They're not allowed to do any kind of work. They would go back out into the sea and they would fish again and catch nothing. And they would come back on Saturday and sit at home and watch all of the fish in front of the town. So they came up with a plan. Some of these people said, we're going to die hungry. We're a fishing town. How can we survive if there's no fish? So they came up with a plan. They dug canals that led to pools on land. And Saturday, when the tide would come in and all the fish were sitting by the shore, the tide would bring them down the canals and into these pools. And then when the tide went out, the water would leave and the fish would remain. And then Sunday morning, bright and early, they would get up and go to these pools and catch all of the fish. Now, when they started doing this, 3 groups of people formed in this city. One group were those who said, hey, we're not doing anything wrong. We're not fishing on Saturday. I mean, the fish stay in the pool on Saturday, but I didn't put them there. So it's not a big deal. They started taking the fish. The second group of people didn't do this, but they said, hey, not my problem. Allah told us not to, I'm not doing it. If these guys want to do it, let them do it. It has nothing to do with me. And the third group of people, when people in their community started doing this, they said, hey, you can't do that. Stop. Now, the first group of people that was doing what they were doing, they kept doing whatever they're doing. They didn't want to stop. The problem became between the second group of people and the third group of people. The second group of people said, I got nothing to do with this. I'm staying out of it. And the third group of people who were stopping these people got into a fight. And they got into an argument. Why are you messing with them? Leave them alone. Let them do what they want to. If Allah punishes them, He punishes them. What's your problem? And the third group of people said, no. It's our job to admonish them and stop them. It's not enough that we don't commit a sin. We have to make sure they don't commit a sin. In the Quran, Allah talks about this conversation between these two groups. And He says, one complained and said, why are you stopping them? Leave them alone. If they want to commit a sin, let them do whatever they want. What does it have to do with you? Mind your business. And the third group said, we can't mind our business. We have an obligation. And these two, when they got into a debate and argument, eventually the third group realized that the people who they were warning wouldn't listen. And the other people were developing an animosity and calling them busybodies and pushing them around. So this third group of people were the ones who not only didn't do this action of trying to secretly catch fish, decided we have to leave this town. Allah is going to punish these people, and if we're here, we're going to get caught in the punishment too. And they decided to leave the town. Now, before we get to that point, our second lesson from this story, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Trying to change the rules of Allah and find exceptions with the rules of Allah. It's something that happens today. Oh, that's not music. That's not haram. That's okay. Do you know in Nahj al-Balagha, in sermon number 156, Imam Ali quotes a narration from the Prophet and he says, oh Ali, after I leave you, there's going to be a lot of trouble here. There's going to be a lot of sedition and people are going to destroy the rules of this religion. Imam Ali says, Ya Rasulullah, explain to me, how will they do this? And Rasulullah says, they will look for excuses. They will know that wine is forbidden, and they will try to say that nabith, which is alcohol made of dates, is okay. Because you see, alcohol made of dates is not wine because wine is made of grapes. So they'll look for exceptions. What they'll do is they'll issue bribes to people, but they won't call it a bribe because a bribe is haram in Islam. They'll call it a gift. Here's $1,000, do something for me. Rasulullah continued, he says that they will take usury and the passing of interest between them, and they will call it a sale. And they will try to find ways to create corruption in the religion of Islam. Following the religion of Islam, learning the rules of the religion of Islam, not looking for exception from the laws, accepting the commands of Allah, is one of the important responsibilities that we have today. If Allah has forbidden us something, then we should count it as forbidden. If Allah has stopped us from an action, it's because Allah knows better than us and He knows what's good for us. When we live in a society that doesn't follow any of the rules of Allah, it's normal that we want to be like them because we live amongst them. But you have to remember to prioritize the command of Allah over our own desires. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So what happens? This group of people, they decide, you know what, the punishment of Allah is going to come down on these people at some point in time, we need to leave. And they all get together and they have a conversation amongst themselves and they say, listen, we're warning these people, they won't stop. And these other people keep yelling at us that why are we trying to stop them? We can't seem to survive in this town. Let's just leave before Allah punishes these people. Remember, Bani Israel had seen the punishment of Allah before. So they get up and they decide to leave, and they're decided, you know what? We're going to leave this town and we'll come back after some time. And we'll see. If Allah doesn't punish them, then maybe we're wrong. So they get up, they get together, and they leave the town. Now in those days, towns still had walls surrounding them. So what would happen is at night, they would close the walls of the city so that no strangers could come into the city at night. And you had to leave before dusk and you could come back after morning. So they decided that what we'll do is we'll start by the process of leaving at night and staying outside of the city in nearby areas. And then during the day, we'll come back, and as we find a place to settle, we'll take our things slowly. The first night that they left, they stayed out of the city, and the punishment of Allah came down on these people. Next morning, they came back to the city after dawn, but the walls weren't open. No one had opened the gates. So these people, they started banging on the walls. They thought maybe these guys are playing a prank on us that we left, so they're trying to punish us. They started banging on the walls, but still nobody would answer. Nothing would happen. Eventually they said, let's take a ladder and let's make a ladder and have someone climb over the wall to see what's going on. And sure enough, they built a ladder. They had someone climb up to the top of the wall and look around. And this guy's face turns completely white. Now I'm describing it turned completely white. Basically they said he was incredibly scared and he came down. He said the punishment of Allah came. He said, what did you see? He says, it's absolutely horrible. They said, what did you see? He says, you have to see it for yourself. You wouldn't believe me if I explained it to you. So sure enough, they had someone climb over the wall and open the gate, and they came into the city. And they found that all of the people in the city had been turned into apes and monkeys. Allah says this in verse 166 in the Quran of Surah A'raf. He turned all of the people into apes. Now these people who are part of this community started to walk around, and first they were in disbelief. Were these really our companions in the city, or is something else going on here? So they started walking around and visiting the houses of their friends and seeing these apes there, and they could recognize from the features who this person was. So they would say to them, didn't I warn you not to do this? Now Allah turned you into a monkey. And they would say that this person didn't have the ability to reply to us, but we could see him weeping at the acknowledgement of the punishment that he had received from Allah. It said that these apes, they stayed alive for a period of 3 days, and then at the end of 3 days, all of them died. This was the punishment of Allah upon these people. Now, lesson number 3 from our story. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. It's not enough that we don't commit sin. Part of our religion and from the furu' ad-din, the wajibat that every Muslim has to perform are what's called amar bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar. Enjoin the good, forbid the evil. It's not enough that you take care of yourself. You have to have a position upon sin and avoiding sin, and a position upon good actions and supporting good actions. Now it happens that in a society like ours, there are certain sins that are so commonplace that it's not possible for us to go out and tell people, hey, don't do this. If you go to a shopkeeper who sells alcohol, na'udhu billah, and tell him, hey, don't do this. It's like, get out of here, what are you doing? Which is why amar bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar have 3 levels. The first of these is to do it with our actions. That we go out and we see something bad, we stop it. We see someone bullying another person, we see someone abusing another person, we see someone stealing, whatever it is, we go out and we stop them and we say, hey, stop, that's wrong, you can't do that. If I can't physically stop them, then the next thing that I do is I use my voice to protest against this action. I say, hey, this is bad, this is not okay, I want this action to stop in my society. Still, there are some things that I can't even use my voice against because they've become so commonplace as sin. And in this situation, it's that in my heart, I can't be indifferent to this action. Remember that second group of people? They were indifferent, they didn't care. Like, they're doing it, let them do it. They're going to get punished, not me. Nope, they got punished too. When we talk about the idea of not being indifferent to a sin, especially in this country, what that means is first and foremost, if I know something is haram, I'm not okay with it. I'm not happy about it, and I never become indifferent that let people do what they want to as long as they're not doing it to me. The second and more important part is you have to talk to your family. You have to explain to them that this is something Allah hates and it's something you need to hate. You have to indoctrinate them into the rules of Allah, because the counterpoint is a society that behaves like there's nothing wrong with this. If you don't tell your families and your children that these actions are something Allah hates and you have to hate them, you can't be okay with this, you can't accept this, tomorrow your children will come home and say, well, what's so wrong? I want to try it too. Because you never taught them that this is haram. You just assume that they knew that if we don't do it, then you don't do it. No, that's not how it works in this country. There's many things that we don't do, but society does. And our children want to experiment. Some things it's okay to experiment. Having pasta night at home, it's okay, it's not haram. We never grew up eating pasta. Why? Because you get salad and roti. Special days you get biryani. What's this pasta? What's lasagna? Your child wants to experiment. You can let them experiment with pasta. It's not haram, it's okay. You don't know about it, that's okay. Your child can eat it, you can have it, you can try it in your house. This is an influence of the culture coming into the house. That's okay. But there are certain influences of the culture you can't let into your house. And your child will not know simply that the fact that we don't do it, it's not allowed. You have to talk to them. You have to explain what our values are. What do we love and what do we hate? And why do we hate it? And the purpose is that if you don't know how to explain why do we hate it, that's where institutions like this and responsible people like me have the obligation to offer you that assistance, to talk to your children, to make sure that the essence of Islam remains alive. If we don't do this action, we will have a generation of children named Ali, Muhammad, Fatima, Hassan, Hussain, Abbas, but inside they'll be no different than everyone else out there. There'll be no difference. We already see it. That at times when you talk to people in society, they will ask us, do you commit, na'uzubillah, such and such haram action? We say, no, I'm a Muslim. So we know other Muslims who do it, that's why we asked you. This will become common for us if we don't take the time now, and Allah is giving us stories like this, stories of the companions of Saturday, to explain to us that there are consequences to these actions. If you don't do this, the punishment of Allah will come down. Sure enough, after 3 days, these people all died. Shall I tell you something interesting about this? All right, sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allah has throughout history changed people into other creations as a punishment. It wasn't just monkeys. At times, Allah has changed people into dogs. At times, elephants. At times, other creations of Allah on this earth. So one of the reasons why all these animals are haram to eat. Now the question comes, does that mean that those people or the monkeys today are formerly humans, and that one day a long time ago this guy's name was Bob and now he's a monkey in his generation? No. As a matter of fact, anytime Allah changes the creation of a human being as a punishment, that creation lives for only a period of 3 days, not more than that. Essentially what's said is that creation that Allah made can't feed itself, because it doesn't know how to live like that animal. So within a period of 3 days, it dies. And it dies of the shock and the harm that's come to it. So one of the questions that comes is, then why do we have dogs and elephants and pigs and monkeys and things that Allah has changed their creation to on this earth? The ulama have explained that one of the reasons why we may have these creations existing on this earth, though they are not from human beings that Allah punished and made into these animals, is a reminder for humanity that when you look at these animals, remember that Allah has the ability to punish us, and be forewarned that a punishment that could come upon us is that we would be rendered like animals like these. One of the explanations is to say that, yeah, it's true. None of these elephants, monkeys, dogs are derivatives of those human beings that were punished. That's not the reason why. But that remember something, that the punishment of Allah can come down, and this could be the conclusion of it. However, there's a benefit that we have that no nation before us had. You guys want another story? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the time of Sheikh al-Ansari, Sheikh al-Ansari is one of the great ulama in our history whose books are still taught and learned in the Hawza. You can't become a mujtahid without studying the teachings of Sheikh al-Ansari. When the marja of the time of Sheikh al-Ansari died, they came to Sheikh al-Ansari and they said, "You're the marja of the time." And Sheikh al-Ansari said, "Nope, not me." He said, "When I used to study with a friend of mine, he was smarter than I was. Go make him the marja. He lives in Hilla." So sure enough, the institution of education went to the city of Hilla, found this individual and said, "Sheikh al-Ansari has instructed us that you should be the marja of the time." Man turned and he says, "Nope." He says, "I stopped studying 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you're right. I was smarter than Sheikh al-Ansari, but now it's been 20 years. I have not been in the practice of studying and learning. I've retired. Go back to Ansari. I tell you, from my knowledge, there is no one smarter than him." So they went back to Sheikh al-Ansari and they said, "Sheikh al-Ansari, the person you referred us to said that you should be qualified and he's retired and doesn't fit the role anymore." Sheikh al-Ansari says, "I refuse to take this marjayit unless if the Imam of the time himself tells me this." So people said, "Now what do we do?" So we're stuck. We don't know what to do now. So things kind of continue like this for a few days. And Sheikh al-Ansari in Najaf would teach a class. And in those days, the class would be, teacher would sit in front, people would fill in the hall. And at the end of Sheikh al-Ansari's class, sometimes people would come in and ask questions. And sure enough, a few days after this incident, he's teaching a class and a man walks into the back of the class. And as Sheikh al-Ansari is finishing his lesson, the man raises his hand. He says, "I have a question for you, Sheikh al-Ansari." Sheikh al-Ansari says, "What's your question?" He says, "What is the condition of a woman if Allah turns her husband into a dog?" Sheikh al-Ansari says, "Well, there are 3 points to this question. The first is, if Allah changes her husband into the statue of a dog, meaning he's no longer alive, he's a statue, but he's a dog. In this case, the woman observes the iddah of one whose husband has died and she is a widow. If Allah changes her husband into a living dog, which is the second point, that in this case, she observes the iddah, meaning the separation period, of a woman who is divorced. But the third point to your question, O questioner, is that this action is completely impossible. This can never happen. Because of the sending of Rahmatul lil Alameen Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah has held back His punishment off of humanity so that nothing like this will ever happen again after the coming of our Holy Prophet, and that any sin that we commit, the punishment and reward will be on the Day of Judgment. Allah will not send His azab and His punishment on any of us today. So your question is impossible to happen. The man stands up and he says, "That's enough. Anta a'lam, anta a'lam, anta a'lam. You Ansari are the most knowledgeable, the most knowledgeable, the most knowledgeable. Thank you very much," and he leaves. Sheikh al-Ansari for a second thinks about what just happened here, and he says, "Go out and look for that person." They go outside and said, "Sheikh al-Ansari, he disappeared. We don't know where he is." He says, "That was the Imam of the time who has now told me it is my responsibility to take on the obligation of being the marja of our time now today." Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight marks the night of Arba'in, the 40th after the event of Karbala. Tomorrow, from amongst the recommended actions, is to recite Ziyarat of Arba'in in the middle of the day if possible. On any such day where there is ibadat that are recommended, it is also mustahab to perform a ghusl on that day. Now this ghusl doesn't take the place of wudu, but it's one of the actions that we perform with the hope that Allah accepts it, that we perform ghusl on a day like Arba'in, and after that we recite the Ziyarat of Arba'in. And any ziyarat that we recite, it's always recommended to recite a 2 rakat salat of ziyarat, qurbatan ilallah, after that ziyarat. There aren't many prescribed a'mal for this day. Some say that, for example, recite Tasbihatul Arba, Subhanallahi walhamdulillahi wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar 70 times. Others say to recite Astaghfirullah 70 times. But simple a'mal like this, but the most significant of these is to recite Ziyarati Arba'in. Now sometimes it happens that we want to just listen to the ziyarat and someone recites it on our behalf. According to Sayyid Sistani, Hafidhahullah, it doesn't count unless if you recite it yourself or the reciter makes the intention that he is reciting it on your behalf. So when we do it collectively, it should be done in such a way that the person who's reciting makes the intention that I'm doing it for all of these people that are here with us, qurbatan ilallah. But individually, we have the obligation then to recite the ziyarat ourselves. If we can't recite it in Arabic, we can follow along in Arabic as we read it and listen to someone who's reciting it. If we can't even do that, then read it in English. But it's one of the recommended actions to perform. And it is a day that we should treat not like other days. It's a day of sadness for us. It's a day of tribulations. One of the interesting points that's worth mentioning here is the discussion around Hazrat Abbas. If you remember, when Imam Ali wanted to have a brave son, he asked his brother Aqil, find me a family that is a family of bravery. I want to have a brave son. I want to have brave children. And Aqil recommended Fatima Kilabiya and said, marry her and you'll have brave sons. We would say that the purpose of the creation of Abu al-Fadl was to be the representative of Imam Ali in the field of Karbala. And he fulfilled his obligation in a way that till today we remember the bravery of Abu al-Fadl. Someone might even question, why cry over Abbas? He was a warrior. He died as a warrior. He served the message of Ahlul Bayt as a warrior. Why? Why do we need to cry over this? But to understand why we need to cry over this, understand that the ladies of the Ahlul Bayt wept over Abbas. Sayyidah Zainab wept over Abbas, and that's why we cry over Abbas. The relationship between Abu al-Fadl and Sayyidah Zainab was set at the shahadat of Imam Ali. And when Imam Ali was giving out his wasiyah to all of his children, he took the corner of the chadar of Bibi Zainab and put it in the hands of Abbas and said, oh Abbas, this Zainab is for you. This is your responsibility now. After this, two things happen at the shahadat of Imam Ali. One, that after Imam Ali completes his wasiyah, Sayyidah Zainab sits next to Imam Ali and she says, Salma narrated a difficult day to me, O father. I want to know if it's true. I can't imagine this difficult day to be true. Amir al-Mu'mineen replied, it is as you are told, O Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab says, until I hear it from your mouth, Baba, I will not believe it. Imam Ali replied, Zainab, one day will come when your brothers will be sacrificed. Nothing will be left, and your hijab will be taken, and you will be taken as a prisoner. Zainab, on that day, be patient with what befalls you. Sayyidah Zainab asks a question that I have seen with my own eyes that broke my heart. She says, but Baba, how can this happen to one who has a brother like Abbas? How could anyone come near me when there is a brother like Abbas to protect me and you have given him my responsibility to be my protector? Amir al-Mu'mineen wept and said, Zainab, that day will come and you will know when it comes. After this, when Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain took their father in the middle of the night to bury the janazah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they describe when we returned back to our house, we heard the weeping of women from our house. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain said, we came back from the burial and we said, what a night of bala that there is crying in the house of our father. When they went inside, they said, we saw our sister Zainab sitting on the musalla of Amir al-Mu'mineen, crying that, how did Baba leave us? Why did he leave us? The Mu'arrikheen and the poets describe that we imagine in this moment from one side Imam Hassan would have comforted her. From one side Imam Hussain would have comforted her. All of the brothers of Sayyidah Zainab would have sat down and said, sister, don't cry. One poet paints a point and he says that I imagine a young boy of 13 would sit on his knees in front of Zainab and say, oh sister, Abbas is alive, why are you crying? How will I show my face to Baba if you cry now? Don't cry, Abbas is alive. I swear, sister, I will let nothing befall you. They describe on the day of Ashura, when Imam Hussein took his forces and aligned them, he made this Abul Fadl his commander and stood him in front of the tent. Why? Because this Abbas was someone that an army of 30,000 would not approach. They would stay away from him in fear. So Abul Fadl had the position of standing in front of the camp so that the women would feel secure, and Abu Abdullah knew that no one would come near these women. Which is why we see on the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein enters the battlefield for every warrior. For every shaheed, Imam Hussein himself goes. Why? Because he knows I may be busy here, but this giant army will not come to my tents as long as Abbas stands in front of it. Some of the Maqatil even note that when Hazrat Abbas would see his nephews fall, when he would see the companions fall, he would have a frustration at seeing the children of Ahlul Bayt killed. When Qasim, a young boy of 13, went into the battlefield and killed the other children, eventually the mature warriors came against Qasim. One poet narrates, he says, I swear I would see Abbas in the back complaining, "Oh Mal'oon, you come against a 13-year-old child who is thirsty for 3 days. Why are you thirsty for the blood of our children?" Abul Fadl would wave his swords in the Maqatil and say, "Why don't you come to me? You kill our children. But Abbas stands here and you won't come to me." This was the guarantee of security that the women had as long as Abul Fadl was alive. And whatever the sacrifice was, they knew that Hazrat Abbas was in front. Which is why when he enters the battlefield and he presents his sacrifice, there are a few points to note. One is that when he falls and Imam Hussein comes to him, Abul Fadl had an arrow in his eye. His arms are cut. He has fallen to the floor of Karbala. He cannot clear the blood from his eyes anymore. Abul Fadl, laying on the ground, hearing someone approaching him, called out and said, "I know you want to collect my head, but let me bid farewell to my brother. I have a wasiyah I have to give him. Let me give him my wasiyah, then you can do with me what you want." Imam Hussein came and said, "Oh Abbas, it is me, your brother." What was the wasiyah of Abul Fadl? We won't recite the entire maqtal of Abul Fadl, but Abul Fadl says, "Brother, don't take me back to the tents. The women will not be able to bear seeing me in this condition. They will be overcome with fear by the fact that I am no more. Brother, leave me here." Imam Hussein took back every shaheed. One scholar says maybe there's another reason why Abul Fadl made this statement. He says, Abul Fadl saw Imam Hussein pick up the body of Ali al-Akbar. The body of Ali al-Akbar is different than every other shaheed. Why? Because two things happened. Two narrations exist in history. When Akbar became shaheed, Imam Hussein went to pick him up. But in history, Akbar, it's noted in history that the children of the Banu Hashim carried Akbar back to the tents, not Imam Hussein. So they say there were two things that could have happened. One, that says that Abu Abdullah tried to lift the body of his grown son 50 times. And 50 times Akbar fell from his hands. That eventually he called Banu Hashim, "Come and take your brother, I can't carry him." If we put the two together, Abul Fadl saw Imam Hussein unable to carry the body of Akbar. He wanted to have mercy on his brother. So he said, "Brother, leave me, don't even try to carry me. Now none of the young of Banu Hashim remain. How will you return me to the tent?" Imam Hussein, leaving Abul Fadl, makes a statement he did not make in the field of Karbala ever before. He called out, "Al-an ankasara dhahari." Now my back has been broken. Why? Because the back that he was leaning on, the support to protect the women, was this Abbas, and now there was no one there. Now Imam Hussein called, "Ala hal min nasirin yansurna?"
ألا هل من مغيث يغيثنا ألا ذاب يذب حرم رسول الله. Is there anyone to help us? Is there any supporter? Is there any protector to protect the daughters of Rasulullah? Upon hearing this, Sayyidah Zainab came to the tent and said, "Oh Hussein, oh my master, where is Abbas? I never heard you call like this as long as Abbas was alive." The Mu'arrikhin writes, Abu Abdullah did not have the words to describe what had happened. He went to the tent of Hazrat Abbas, and the pole that keeps the tent standing in the middle, Imam Hussein knocked over this pole, and Sayyidah Zainab knew now that this Abbas is not coming back. She turned to the direction of Najaf and said, "Baba, the day of your wasiyah is here." This isn't where the Masa'ib end. The 13th of Muharram, how this Abul Fadl was different and why we know the women wept on him. Imam Zainul Abidin made 2 graves on the 13th of Muharram himself. All of the others, the Banu Asad, assisted Imam Hussein in making the graves, but 2 graves, Imam Zainul Abidin insisted, "I will make myself." One was the grave of his father. When he completed that, they said, "We saw Zainul Abidin go off into the trees and hug something to his chest and come back. Then we saw him go in another direction, hug something to his chest and return. And we asked, 'Oh, our master, did we make a mistake? Did we miss something?' He said, 'No, I went to go collect the arms of my uncle Abbas.'" The second grave Imam Zainul Abidin made was the grave of his uncle, and he said to the Banu Asad, "I will go in this grave, none of you are to follow me or join me. No one come in this grave." The Banu Asad said, a long time after Imam Zainul Abidin entered the grave, he did not come out. We knew Imam Zainul Abidin was ill. We knew the difficulties he was facing. We became worried, is our Imam okay? They said eventually we gained the courage to look into the grave and see. We found Ali ibn al-Hussein hugging the body of Abbas and crying, "Oh uncle, where did you leave us? Oh uncle, what a state of difficulty we're in. Oh uncle, as we entered the bazaar, the women started calling your name one after another. Oh uncle, I had no words to answer them. Why did you leave us in such difficulty? Why were you not there to protect us?" Further still, when the prisoners of Sham were told that they would go home, Mal'un Yazid called Imam Zainul Abidin. And he said, "I shall fill 3 of your requests. Ask me whatever you desire." Imam Zainul Abidin replied, "First and foremost, I want you to return the head of my father. Second, those things that were looted from us and stolen from us, I want you to return them to us. And third, if you have intended to kill me, then find a reliable person to return these women and children back to the city of Medina." Yazid replied, "With regards to your first request, you will never see the head of your father again. I will not return him to you. With regards to your second request, we shall return the tabarrukat to your family. I will collect them and give them to you. And with your third request, I have given up on killing any more of the children of Hussein. You may take the women yourself and leave." When Imam Zainul Abidin returned back to the women, he said that they will return to us the tabarrukat and they have set us free. Now the tabarrukat came to Yazid and Yazid collected them. Amongst these tabarrukat, they brought something that looked like the trunk of a tree. And it was a trunk of a tree, a giant piece of wood that they said was covered with arrows and marks of burns, except for 2 places. Yazid said, "What is this trunk of a tree that you have brought me? What is this giant piece of wood?" They replied, "Oh Amir Mal'un, this is not the trunk of a tree, but this is the alam of the hands of Abbas." Yazid said, "But I see that it is charred and marked everywhere, but there are 2 places where the wood is still fresh." They said, "Yes, this is the place where Abul Fadl would hold the alam from." Mal'un Yazid said, "You mean to tell me that this wood was burned while it was in his hands? these arrows were shot while it was in his hands, and he never removed his hands from it. They said, oh Amir, Abul Fadl was the one that didn't remove his hands from this alam until we cut his hands from his body. Yazid said, even I then must then accept the bravery of this Abbas, return this to them. They described that as the tabarrukat were returned to the women, and the chadar of Sayyidah Fatima was returned, the shirt given to Imam Hussain that was made by Bibi Fatima was returned. One item I'll mention to you, that a chadar was returned that was a red colored chadar. When they ask what was this red colored chadar that was returned, one explains that this was the chadar of Sayyidah Zainab that was stolen from her head on Sham Gharima. Someone asks, Sayyidah Zainab wore a red chadar on that day? No. Rather what you find is that the chadar Sayyidah Zainab was wearing was white. But when they brought the body of Akbar with the spear wound in his chest, Zainab threw herself on the body of her nephew. As the tabarrukat were returned, this piece of the alam of Abul Fadl was returned. Why do we cry for Abul Fadl? I'll tell you. The women, upon seeing the alam of Hazrat Abbas, sat in a circle around the alam and started to put their cheeks on the places of the hands of Abul Fadl and cried, Abbas, where were you? Oh Abbas, why don't you return to us? The women all placing their cheeks on the place of the hands of Abul Fadl wept and wept and wept. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الإحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Ya Allah, forgive our sins, cover our flaws. Ya Allah, by the right of these tears that we shed, those who are sick amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen, give shifa'ah to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, by the right of the mention of Babul Hawa'ij, we have come with hajat, fulfill our hajat. Ya Allah, give us the shifa'ah of Imam Hussain in dunya and akhirah. Maatam and Hussain.
Ya Hussain, 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 Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya حسین یا حسین یا حسین قید سے چھٹ کے جو پہنچے تھے حرم کرب و بلا، قید سے چھٹ کے جو پہنچے تھے حرم کرب و بلا، قبر شبیر پہ زینب نے کیا یہ نوحہ، کیا یہ نوحہ، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، میرا عباس دلاور ہے کہاں، ماں کا ارماں علی اکبر ہے کہاں، جھولے والا علی اصغر ہے کہاں، یہ بتاؤ ہے کہاں ابن حسن، قید ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، میرا عباس دلاور ہے کہاں، ماں کا ارماں علی اکبر ہے کہاں، جھولے والا علی اصغر ہے کہاں، یہ بتاؤ ہے کہاں ابن حسن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے ذہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، ہو کے آزاد بہن آئی ہے، دیکھو برباد بہن آئی ہے، کائنا شاد بہن آئی ہے، دے نہ پائی جو تمہیں رن میں کفن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، ہائے کہتی تھی یہ رو رو مضطر، سر سے چھینی گئی میری چادر، تیری جاگیر میں علی اکبر، مجھ کو امت سے ملے رنج و محن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، قاضی عاصیانوں کے نشاں بازو پر، زخم تیروں کے لیے پہلو پر، دھول رستے کی رکے ابرو پر، دیکھو ہاتھوں میں لیے داغ رسن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، خاک بالوں پہ اڑانے والی، رنج امت سے اٹھانے والی، آئی ہے آنسو بہانے والی، کیسے جاتی تیرے بن بھائی وطن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، سینہ زن گریا کنا نوحہ بلب، در بدر خاک بسر غم کے سبب، بھائی کی قبر سے لپٹی زینب، ضبط کے ٹوٹ گئے سب بندھن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، سینہ زن گر یا کنا نوحہ بلب، در بدر خاک بسر غم کے سبب، بھائی کی قبر سے لپٹی زینب، ضبط کے ٹوٹ گئے سب بندھن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، بولی زینب وہ حزینہ بھائی، یاد کرتی تھی مدینہ بھائی، نہ رہی تیری سکینہ بھائی، کھا گئی قید میں بچی کو گٹھن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، رو کے زینب نے کہا یہ بن میں آگ بچی کہ لگی دامن میں، ٹوٹ گئی میری کمائی رن میں، میرے بے سر میرے پامال بدن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، ایک ایک قبر پہ زینب کا سلام، کشتہ جب پہ زینب کا سلام، آئے جو ماں لشکر صبر پہ زینب کا سلام، آئے جو ماں رہ گئے تشنا دہن، قید سے ہو کے رہا شاہ زمن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے کو آئی ہے بہن، اربعین کرنے آئی ہے بہن یا حسین یا حسین حسین یا 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 حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین ایک جانب ہے مقام علی اکبر دیکھو ایک مقام ایسا کہ گہوارہ اصغر دیکھو ہر جگہ شیخ کے عزاداروں کا منظر دیکھو انبیاء اور ملک بھی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین ایک جانب ہے مقام علی اکبر دیکھو ایک مقام ایسا کہ گہوارہ اصغر دیکھو ہر جگہ شیخ کے عزاداروں کا منظر دیکھو انبیاء اور ملک بھی ہیں عزادار حسین آؤ وار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین کربلا تم کو بلاتی ہے عزادار حسین آؤ زوار حسین یا 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 حسین
جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے وہ قتل ہو کے رہا دین کی بقا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے لب فرات پہ نیزے بلند ہوتے رہے لب فرات پہ نیزے بلند ہوتے رہے حسین ہاتھ اٹھا دے رہے دعا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے وہ ایک پردہ نشیں روبرو تھی مقتل میں وہ ایک پردہ نشیں روبرو تھی مقتل میں جو کہہ رہی تھی نما رو اسے خدا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے قدم قدم پہ حبیب و ظہر کہتے رہے قدم قدم پہ حبیب و ظہر کہتے رہے حیات و موت ہے موت لا تیری رضا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے دعائے فاطمہ زہرا کے وہ حصار میں ہے دعائے فاطمہ زہرا کے وہ حصار میں ہے جو ہاتھ اٹھتے ہیں شبیر کی عزا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے وہ قتل ہو کے رہا دین کی بقا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے جس سے رسول نے پالا تھا کربلا کے لیے یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
أزور سيدي ومولاي ومعتمدي ورجائي ذخري وذخيرتي في آخرتي ودنياي الإمام الحسين عليه السلام تمام زيارة 40 مني والنيابة عن والدين وعن والد والدين وعن إخواني وأخواتي وعن جميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات قربة طاعة إلى الله تعالى. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا محمدا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا خاتم النبيين، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين والمؤمنات، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن ورحمة الله وبركاته. زيارة 40 حسين. السلام على ولي الله وحبيبي، السلام على خليل الله ونجيبي، السلام على سفي الله وابن سفيه، السلام على الحسين المظلوم الشهيد، السلام على الأسير الكربات وقتيل الأبرات. اللهم إني أشهد أنه وليك وابن وليك وسفيك وابن سفيك الفائز بكرامتك، أكرمته بالشهادة وحبوت بالسعادة واتبيته بطيب الولادة وجعلته سيدا من السادات وقائدا من الكادات وزائدا من الزادات وآتيته المواريث الأنبياء وجعلته حجة على خلقك من الأوصياء، فعزل في الدعاء ومنح النصح وبذل محجته فيك ليستنقذ عبادك من الجهالة وخيرة الزلالة، وقد توازر عليه من حرته الدنيا وباخته بالأرض لأدنى وشرى آخرته بالثمن أو كس وتحترس وترد في هواه وأسخطك وأسخط نبيك وعتاء من عبادك أهل الشكاك والنفاك وحملة أوزار المستوجبين النار، فجاهدوا فيك صابرا محتسبا حتى سفك في طاعتك دمه واستبيه هرمه. اللهم فلعنهم لعنا وبيلا وعزمهم عذابا أليم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الأوصياء، أشهد أنك أمين الله وابن أمين، شست سعيدا ومزيت حميدا ومت فكيدا مظلوما شهيدا، وأشهد أن الله منجز ما وعدك ومهلك من خذلك ومعذب من قتلك، وأشهد أنك وفيت بعهد الله وجاهدت في سبيله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله من ظلمك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت بي. اللهم إني أشهدك أني ولي لمن وعلاه وعدو لمن آداه بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله. أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المتأخرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك متلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من داعم الدين وأركان المسلمين ومأكل المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن أئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد أني بكم مؤمن وبيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع ونصرتي لكم معدة حتى يأذن الله معكم فمعكم لا مع عدوكم. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وأجسادكم وشاهدكم وغائبكم وظاهركم وباطنكم. آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى الكاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد التقي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي النكي. السلام عليك يا حسن العسكري. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله فرجك وسهر الله مخرجك ورزقني الله في الدنيا زيارتك وفي الآخرة شفاعتك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. مع السلامات.
اللهم صل على محمد.